You're standing on the dock, coffee in one hand, checkbook in the other, staring at a boat that costs more than my first house. And the salesman is smiling at you like he already knows how this ends. I've been exactly where you are right now. That smile cost me thousands of dollars before I ever learned the truth. Here's what I know now that I wish somebody had told me 20 years ago. The average buyer overpays for a boat by somewhere between 30 and 40%, and almost none of it is the boat's fault. It's what you don't know when you walk up. I didn't believe that either. I thought a boat was a boat and the price was the price. I was wrong, and it cost me real money. But by the end of this, you're going to know a way that seized boats, perfectly good ones, get sold to ordinary people for pennies on the dollar through a public system almost nobody talks about. It comes straight out of a federal program with a paper trail going back decades. And this applies to you right now, whether you want a little fishing skiff or a cabin cruiser you can sleep on. I still remember the smell of that first boat lot in the spring, hot vinyl and diesel and fresh wax, and how badly I wanted to belong there. That want is exactly what they sell to. So let me walk you through every hack I learned the hard way, one at a time, because the first one already would have saved me almost $4,000. The first thing nobody tells you is that a boat has a season, and it is not the season you think. I bought my first boat in April, spring. The water was calling, the sun was out, and every other person in my town had the exact same idea at the exact same moment. That was my mistake, and it was a big one. Here is what I learned. Boat prices move like a tide, and they crest in spring and crash in fall. If you walk onto a lot in late September, October, or the dead of winter, you are talking to a dealer who is staring down the barrel of storage costs, floor plan interest, and a showroom full of hulls he has to insure and heat all winter long. Every boat sitting on that lot in November is costing him money every single day. In spring you need him. In fall he needs you. That is the whole game, and it flips completely depending on the month you show up. The numbers on this are not small. I have watched the identical model, same year, same engine, same trailer, drop by $4,000 to $6,000 between June and December on the same lot. One boat dealer in the Great Lakes region told me flat out that he would rather move a boat at cost in January than pay to babysit it until May. Because a boat that sits is a boat that ages, and a boat that ages loses value whether anyone drives it or not. So the first hack is simply this: never shop in spring if you can help it. Shop when the leaves are falling and the docks are coming out of the water. You will be the only serious buyer in the room, and that changes everything about the conversation. But timing is only the beginning, because even at the perfect time of year, there is a second thing that quietly decides whether you got a treasure or a money pit, and it has nothing to do with the price tag. That second thing is where the boat spent its life. When I was shopping, every listing bragged about horsepower, cup holders, stereo systems, the color of the upholstery. Not one of them told me the single most important fact about a used boat, which is whether it lived in salt water or fresh water. Salt water is brutal. It eats aluminum, it corrodes wiring, it pits the metal inside your engine, and it does its damage in places you cannot see from the dock. A boat that spent 10 years in the ocean and a boat that spent 10 years in a mountain lake can look identical under a fresh coat of wax, but one of them is quietly rotting from the inside, and one of them is barely broken in. Here is the trick I use now. I look for freshwater-only boats and I verify it. I ask where the boat was registered, I check the registration history, and I look at the engine's cooling passages and the metal fittings for that white, crusty corrosion salt leaves behind. A freshwater boat from a place like the upper Midwest or a big inland reservoir can have twice the usable life of a saltwater boat the same age. 2 engines, same hours, same year, and the freshwater one might last you 15 more years while the saltwater one gives up in 5. And here is where it gets worse. Because the industry figured out something a long time ago. They learned that if a boat looks shiny, most people will never ask what is underneath. A good detail job, a buffer, and some spray-on shine can hide years of neglect. I have seen boats that were minutes from a major failure looking like showroom pieces because somebody spent $200 making them pretty. The shine is the disguise. Once you know that, you stop trusting your eyes and start trusting your hands and your questions. But even your hands can be fooled unless you know the 3 spots on a boat where the truth always hides. That is where I almost got destroyed on my second purchase, and I want you to never make that mistake. The 3 spots are the transom, the stringers, and the deck. Let me tell you what happened to me, because this is the hack that could save you the entire price of the boat. I found what looked like a perfect used runabout. Clean, shiny, priced fair, freshwater history, the whole package. I was ready to write the check. But something an old marine mechanic told me was stuck in my head, so I did the one thing almost no buyer does. I pushed on the transom, the flat back wall of the boat where the engine hangs, and I felt it flex. Just a little. A soft, spongy give under my palm, like pressing on a stale loaf of bread. That softness meant the wood core inside the fiberglass had soaked up water and rotted. That boat needed a repair that would have cost me between $5,000 and $8,000, more than half of what they were asking for the whole boat. From the outside, it was flawless. The rot was completely invisible. I walked away, and I have never been more grateful for a sore palm in my life. So here is exactly what to do, and you can do this on any boat this weekend, with nothing but your own 2 hands. First, press firmly on the transom, that back wall, especially down low near the engine. It should feel rock hard everywhere. Any softness, any give, any spongy spot, and you walk. Second, step down hard on the deck, the floor you stand on, in several places, especially around the edges. It should not flex, crackle, or feel mushy. A soft deck means the stringers underneath, the wooden backbone of the boat, are rotting. Third, open every hatch and stick your head down into the bilge and smell it. A healthy boat smells like plastic and a little oil. A rotting boat smells like a wet basement, that musty mildew smell. Your nose knows before your eyes do. Now I know some of you are listening to this and thinking, this is all fine for somebody buying a fancy boat, but I just want a little aluminum fishing boat and a small motor. This fancy inspection stuff is not for me. I made this next part especially for you, because you are actually the one who can win biggest here, and I am going to prove it. Every single thing I just told you works on a $2,000 aluminum John boat, exactly like it works on a $50,000 cruiser. In fact, it matters more, because when you are spending less, you have less margin to waste on a bad one. So here is the at-home version you can do today with things you already own. Take a cheap magnet from your refrigerator. On an aluminum boat, run it along the hull. It will not stick to good aluminum, but if somebody patched a hole with body filler and painted over it to hide corrosion, the magnet behavior and the surface will feel different, and you can see the patch line in raking light. Take a flashlight, the one on your phone works, and shine it low across the hull at a sharp angle. Every dent, every wave in the metal, every hidden repair jumps right out at you when the light rakes sideways instead of straight on. Then grab a garden hose before you buy, if the seller will let you, and run water into the boat while it sits on the trailer, and watch underneath for leaks. A dry driveway under a boat full of water is a good boat. Little streams coming out the bottom tell you everything you need to know for free. And take a common wooden pencil, hold it against the aluminum, and tap along the seams and rivets with a small wrench, listening. Solid metal rings clear and bright. Corroded or cracked metal sounds dull and dead. Old boat builders used sound like this for 100 years before there was a single electronic gadget for sale. These are not tricks for rich people. These are tricks for smart people, and being smart is free. But even after all of that, there is still one part of the boat you cannot press, tap, or smell your way into. And it is the single most expensive part to replace: the engine. This is where I lost the most money in my life, and it is where the deepest hack lives. When you buy a used car, you check the mileage. Everybody knows that. But a boat does not have miles, it has hours. And here is the thing almost nobody tells you. Most people have no idea what the hours even mean, and sellers count on that confusion. I certainly did. I looked at an engine with a low hour reading and thought I was buying something barely used. I was wrong in a way that cost me a rebuilt engine. Let me give you the real numbers. A gasoline boat engine is generally considered to have a usable life somewhere around 1,500 hours, though a well-maintained one can go much longer. A diesel can go far beyond that, often 3,000 to 5,000 hours or more if it was cared for. But here is the part that shocked me. Boat engines are not damaged most by heavy use. They are damaged by sitting. An engine that only shows 200 hours over 15 years is not a barely used gem. It is an engine that sat unused, month after month, while moisture crept into the cylinders, seals dried out and cracked, and fuel turned to varnish inside the carburetor. Low hours over a long life can actually be a warning sign, not a selling point. I had that exactly backward, and it emptied my wallet. And that silence is not an accident, which is exactly why I want to pause here for just a moment. Everything I am sharing with you in this video came out of years of hard lessons, bad purchases, and conversations with the kind of people who built and repaired boats for a living. I eventually put all of it together in a book called First Principles, and the full framework lives in the complete edition called The Full System. It covers not just boats, but the deeper thinking behind any major purchase where the other side of the table knows more than you do. If you want to go further than what we can cover here, the link to grab it is in the description below. It is the resource I wish had existed when I was standing on that dock with my checkbook out. Now, with that in mind, let me take you to the part of this business that made me genuinely angry once I understood it. So the hack is to ask two questions, not one. Not just how many hours, but over how many years, and how often was it run and serviced. A boat with 400 hours spread evenly over 8 years, with oil changed every season, is worth far more than one with 200 hours that sat in a barn for a decade. Ask for the service records. Ask when the oil was last changed, when the impeller was replaced, when it was last winterized. A seller who has the paperwork is a seller who cared. A seller who shrugs is a seller who is about to hand you their problems. But records can be faked, and memories are convenient. So how do you actually see inside a sealed engine you are not allowed to take apart? That is the question that led me to the single best $25 I have ever spent on a boat, and it is a method the average buyer has never even heard of. It is called an oil analysis. And when I first heard about it, I thought it sounded like something only a laboratory or a millionaire would bother with. I was wrong again, and I am glad I was. Here is how it works. Before you buy, you draw a small sample of the engine oil, just a few ounces into a little bottle, and you mail it to a lab that specializes in this. A place like Blackstone Laboratories in Fort Wayne, Indiana, has been doing exactly this for regular people for decades, and the cost is around $25 to $30 per sample. They put that oil under instruments that measure the microscopic metal particles floating in it, and those particles tell a story no seller can hide. High iron means the cylinders and camshaft are wearing out. High copper or lead means the bearings are failing. High chromium means the piston rings are going. Aluminum tells you about the pistons themselves. Water or coolant in the oil means the head gasket is breaking down and the engine could be near catastrophic failure. Think about what that means. For the price of a cheap dinner, you can read the inside of an engine like an X-ray before you spend $20,000 or $30,000. A blown boat engine can cost $8,000 to $15,000 to replace. That little bottle of oil is the difference between a smart purchase and a financial disaster. I have walked away from 2 boats because of what came back in that report, and both times the seller swore the engine was perfect. The oil does not lie, and the oil cannot be waxed and buffed to look pretty. And this is the moment I want you to really sit with, because it points to something bigger. Every one of these hacks, the timing, the freshwater history, the transom, the deck, the engine hours, the oil analysis, they all exist because the boat business runs on one simple bet. The bet is that you will trust the shine, trust the smile, and trust the price tag, and that you will never learn what the old-timers knew. The people who built and repaired these boats for a living understood every one of these tests. That knowledge did not disappear by accident. It faded because a well-informed buyer is a cheap buyer, and a cheap buyer is bad for business. The less you know, the more you pay. That is not a conspiracy. That is just the quiet arithmetic of every lot in the country. So let me give you a few faster hacks, the ones that fill out the list, before I get to the big one I promised you at the start. Because that final method changes the entire math of buying a boat. Hack 1. The trailer is worth real money, and it is negotiated separately in your head, even when it is bundled in the price. A decent used boat trailer can be worth $1,000 to $3,000 on its own. When a seller bundles a rough boat with a good trailer, sometimes the trailer is the only thing actually worth buying. Always price them apart in your mind. Check the trailer tires for dry rot, the ones with cracks in the sidewalls, and check the wheel bearings, because a seized bearing on the highway can destroy your whole trip. Hack 2. Boat shows are a trap and an opportunity at the same time. The excitement in that convention hall is engineered to make you sign that day with special show pricing. But here is the secret. Take the salesman's card, take the exact model and options down on paper, and walk out without signing anything. Then call 3 other dealers the following week and ask them to beat the show price. Show pricing is rarely the best price. It is the best price they can get from someone caught up in the moment. Hack 3. The manufacturer's plate and the hull identification number tell you the boat's real age, and this matters more than you think. Since a federal law called the Federal Boat Safety Act of 1971, every boat built for sale in the United States after November 1, 1972, has been required to carry a permanent hull identification number, usually on the upper right corner of the transom. Those last characters encode the model year and the year it was built. A dishonest seller might call a boat a later model than it really is. That little string of numbers, required by law for over 50 years, cannot be casually changed, and it tells you the truth about the boat's actual age. Learn to read it, and no one can lie to you about the year. Hack 4. Registration and title must match the hull number and the seller's name exactly. If they do not, walk away. A boat with a murky title is a boat you may never be able to legally register in your own name, and no bargain is worth owning something you cannot prove is yours. Hack 5. Winterizing and storage are the hidden ongoing costs that turn a cheap boat into an expensive habit. Before you buy anything, price out what it costs to store and winterize it in your area for a full year. Sometimes the smaller, simpler boat you can store in your own driveway saves you far more over 5 years than a bigger boat you have to pay a marina to babysit. Now, I promised you at the very beginning that there was a way ordinary people get perfectly good boats for pennies on the dollar, through a public system almost nobody talks about. This is the one I saved for last, because when I finally understood it, I felt like I had found a door that had been standing wide open my whole life, while I paid full price to come in through the front. Here is how I stumbled onto it. I was reading about how the government handles property that gets seized, when someone fails to pay taxes, or when law enforcement confiscates property in a case, or when a federal agency simply retires equipment it no longer needs, all of that property has to go somewhere. It gets sold. And boats, it turns out, are seized constantly. Boats tied to unpaid debts, boats abandoned in marinas, boats taken in criminal cases, boats the Coast Guard and other agencies are done using. All of it flows into public auctions that any citizen can bid in. The main doorway is a government website called GSA Auctions, run by the General Services Administration, the agency that handles federal property. There is also the United States Treasury's auction program and the United States Marshals Service sales, which handle seized and forfeited property. These are not secret, they are completely legal, completely public, and they have been running for decades, but almost nobody I know had ever heard of them because there is no salesman standing on a dock making a commission to tell you about them. Nobody profits from teaching you this, so nobody teaches it. The boats that come through these auctions can go for a fraction of their market value, sometimes 20, 30, 40 cents on the dollar, because the government is not trying to make a profit. It is trying to clear property and recover costs. A boat that would list for $30,000 on a lot can sell for $8,000 or $10,000 at one of these auctions, and I have seen smaller boats go for a few $100s when there were few bidders that day. Now I am going to be honest with you, the way I wish someone had been honest with me, because a hack without its catch is just bait. These boats are sold as is, with no warranty and often no chance to sea trial them first. That is exactly why everything I taught you today matters so much here. This is where all of it comes together. You show up to the viewing with your hands and your nose and your flashlight and your magnet. You press the transom. You stomp the deck, you smell the bilge, you read the hull identification number, you check whether it lived in salt or fresh water, and if the rules allow it, you pull a little oil sample, and you know what you are bidding on before you ever raise your hand. The buyer who knows nothing is terrified of an as-is auction. The buyer who knows what you now know walks in like they own the place. That is the whole secret. The auctions were never the hard part. The hard part was being the kind of buyer who could tell a treasure from a trap without a salesman's help, and that is exactly the person you have become in the last few minutes. So here is what I want you to carry away from all of this. You are not at the mercy of the shine, the smile, or the season anymore. You have your hands, your nose, a magnet, a flashlight, a $25 bottle of oil, and a public doorway most people will never even know exists. The knowledge that got buried under all that showroom wax is back in your hands now, where it always belonged. You are the kind of person who would rather learn the truth once than pay for the lie forever. That is who does well on the water, and that is who does well in life. The boat does not care how much you spent. It only cares whether you knew what you were doing when you bought it. Now I want to hear from you, and I mean this. Of everything I just walked you through, was it the soft transom test, the oil analysis, or the government seizure auctions that surprised you the most? Tell me in the comments because I read them, and I want to know which one you are going to try first. And while you are down there, tell me where you are watching from and what kind of boat you are dreaming about. A little fishing skiff or something you can sleep on, because I am genuinely curious who is out there with me. If you want more of this, the real, tested, hands-on kind of knowledge that keeps your money in your own pocket instead of somebody else's register, then come along with the rest of us who are digging these old methods back up one by one. Next time I am going to show you the 3 questions to ask a private seller over the phone that will make 90% of the bad boats hang up on you before you ever waste a Saturday driving out to see them. You do not want to miss that one, because those 3 questions have saved me more weekends and more heartbreak than anything else I have ever learned. I will see you there. So that's the start, but here I could only scratch the surface. Inside the Old Ways Almanac, I pick up right where this video left off. And if something puzzles you, you can ask me directly, a real person, me. Answers you myself, not a machine. You'd be joining folks just like you. Just point your phone's camera at the code on your screen, and you can cancel anytime, no risk.